Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very thankful to you for coming to this session and also staying with us. Also very thankful to the presenters. I just forgot to mention that they are also contributing to an edited book, except Aya, who is writing her own book. I've got a lot actually to present, 49 slides, so I have to be super strategic and skip a lot of details. So I leave some of that to you to Google and find out for yourself. Also, I have uploaded the PDF version of these slides online, so you can download them. And also we can, of course, after the presentation, have some conversation. So here's the topic or the title. Well, after the acknowledgement that we forgot to make, I'll read out to some of the earlier slides just to save time, and then speak to the rest of them. Today in my presentation, I will be sharing a subset of the findings from a mixed method research project. The primary aim of this nationwide pilot project was originally to examine the perceptions of quality of life among transformative civil society and grassroots organizations in the context of Australia during 2021-22. However, it has yielded a wealth of information, which I have here repurposed and reinterpreted to examine the concept of pluriverse/pluriversality empirically and critically. In the field of the post-development, post-colonial scholarship, an increasingly influential concept has emerged known as the pluriverse, the new kid in the block. This concept, while still being debated, and hopefully this paper would contribute to that debate, encapsulates the vast and diverse reality inhabited by a multitude of actors who are actively shaping alternative ways of existing, knowing, and living. Thus, the pluriverse challenges and contrast with the prevailing global dominance of universalistic frameworks rooted in the nexus of Eurocentric, anthropocentric, patriarchal, capitalist, developmentalist, and colonialist ontologies. However, it is important to acknowledge that as a theoretical construct, the concept of pluriverse is based on a certain ontological, epistemological assumptions, if that makes sense. These assumptions can potentially limit our understanding of the intricate complexities and nuances of the real world. One notable aspect of the pluriversalist view is its celebration of diversity, relationality, non-duality, and indigeneity, thus ascribing an inherent emancipatory capacity to what is defined as the pluriverse and the pluriversal politics. So you see that normative aspect of it. Hence, the normative aspect of the concept can inadvertently shape the selection and interpretation of its descriptive aspects. Everybody doing a research would have a dilemma of who I should include in the research as the actors of the pluriverse. So the notion of pluriverse carries the inherent risk of inadvertently perpetuating a new form of dualism in the guise of non-duality. Well, this dualism manifests itself as a dichotomy between a potentially positive pluriverse versus an inherently negative universe. Such a perspective overlooks the complex mechanisms that interconnect and influence both realms, disregarding the mutual influences and interconnectedness between them. By neglecting or underestimating the intricate relationship between the good pluriverse and the bad universe, we run the risk of oversimplifying the dynamics at play and failing to grasp the interconnected nature of these contrasting orientations. It is thus critical to assess the extent to which the pluriverse concept effectively aids our comprehension of intricate dynamism, complexities, convergences, and divergences within the multifaceted reality it seeks to encompass. The reality that I call here the actually existing pluriverse. Now, to make this assessment, we first need to scrutinize the notion a bit. especially in terms of its possible empirical and practical pitfalls. So as you can see on that slide, I have listed three pitfalls, which are as follows. One, extending the normative negation of universalism to the level of analysis. I mean, there's always, we look at the literature, there's a confusion between the normative and the analytical. So if you extend that normative negation to the analysis of the reality, then we may run the risk of a kind of analytical blindness in understanding how capital constructs homogeneity to sustain its hegemony. And this may lead to an underestimating the structural factors that may actually almost universally facilitate the realization of solidarities and synergies across the differences in the pluriverse. So that's one risk or pitfall. The second is the compartmentalization of life domains, or the so-called web of life, if you like, under capital is very likely to be translated into the pluriverse, resulting in its compartmentalization between the social, ecological, economic, and political spheres. Under the pluriversalist theory, this compartmentalization may be mistakenly celebrated as a form of diverse expression. And the third one is that the pluriverse interpretations overlook the necessity of systemic solidarity building, intentional solidarity building across the differences for the pluriverse to bring about worldwide systemic change. This assumption resembles the neoliberal ideology of laissez-faire that we wanted to oppose originally, as it assumes that solidarities would naturally emerge from the free market of interactions between a multitude of alternative movements. So that's the assumption that we would like to actually put to the test, and see if when we look at when we compare the theory and the reality, can we perhaps see that assumption going on or not? And that can actually translate into three research questions. So the first question, empirical research question, is to what extent is this actually existing pluriverse compartmentalized under the influences of nexus of capital, modernity, coloniality? The second, what cognitive practical tendency exists within the pluriverse among the actors to overcome the state of compartmentality? Well, a new concept now is introduced, I guess. And then third, what social factors determine such tendencies among the actors? So these are the research questions that I have been trying to answer by drawing on the quantitative data we gathered. Yeah, I think, and then, yes, there is a number of methods, of course, but perhaps the least well-received one is the network analysis, which I have adopted and in this project. And we can do network analysis in two ways. Normally, people investigate the already existing and established connections between the actors in the pluriverse. In this case, I have gone beyond that. And what I'm using, I call it meta mapping, which is about exploring potential connections, going beyond the established connections and exploring latent possibilities for collaboration by uncovering the shared aspirations, shared values and struggles, and of course the differences that can serve as a common ground for solidarity. So this kind of approach can acknowledge barriers, differences and divergences to understand obstacles and identify influential actors as well. I skipped this one. It's a little bit about benefits of such an approach, or what I call meta mapping. Well, now when we want to do mapping, of course we need a train, right? So every mapping project or exercise necessitates a prior definition of the train within which we seek to situate the actors of the pluriverse. If the purpose is to explore how the pluriverse is compartmentalized, thus the train is the compartmentalized reality of social life, and the criterion for establishing the position of the actors in that train is the level of their level of being influenced by and their tendency to overcome the state of compartmentality. within the pluriverse. Therefore, it is essential to formulate a clear definition for this particular tendency. This definition serves as a conceptual gauge that guides situating the participants in mapping train. So under the title of the communist tendency, as a social indicator in order to measure to what extent these people would like to overcome and go beyond the boundaries and work together across the differences, I introduced this definition this way. A communist tendency is a meta-ideological tendency relatively shared across the actors in the pluriverse of transformative force that transcends the compartmentalization of more than human life into the categories of the economic, the ecological, the political, and the social by translating the radical interdependence of our failing world civilization system into synergistic practical priorities. So if you wonder why communist, perhaps the reason is that when we look at the commons, there are normally the best examples where we can find deep entanglement and the least amount of compartmentalization in the commons. So that's why I chose the word common or communist. So that's so in order to choose our participants, so we use that criteria of the and with this under the definition of the transformative forces pluralist initiatives that proactively envision alternative modes of livelihood and sociability to neoliberal capitalism by valuing good life above profit, power, and so on and so forth. So you can see the dilemma. I mean, who we can really include and who we should exclude from the research. A dilemma that I don't have a very clear-cut answer to that. So here, perhaps it visualizes this the train. You can see this is the compartmentalized reality of social life. We can discuss why in this way. It could be in other ways, but anyway. So we can. This is how the reality is compartmentalized into the economy, the politics, the community, and ecology. But the point is that if we are going to investigate and situate the actors in this train in terms of their communist tendency, then the assumption is that, for instance, those who are active, let's say, in the economy section, and they want to equalize economy, promoting social justice, therefore they should be also be open to the idea of democratizing the economy as well, ecologizing the economy as well, and socializing the economy as well. Why? Because the economy is very much deeply entangled to the ecology, to community, and to the politics, and the same with the rest of that. So this model can actually give us a very can actually translate into a number of statements that we can actually give to the and we have done that to the participants, and asking them to what extent you guys agree with this statement. So you can see 4 fields. We have 4 fields, 4 processes of decompartmentalization in each one of them. 4 times 4, 16. So we have then 16 statements that we developed, that each one of them measures each one of these decompartmentalization processes. For instance, in terms of the democratization of economy, we gave them a statement like this, and we asked them to see to what extent they see it related or relevant to their primary purpose of their work, their initiative. So promoting more democratic workplaces. In terms of democratization of political relations, promoting direct radical democracy, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I don't have time, but this is available online. You can have a look at their statements. And there are 16 of them. And we also gathered a pretty comprehensive range of information about the qualities and features of these groups, organizations, initiatives, the types of organization and legal forms. We just wanted to know to what extent such factors would improve or increase or decrease their level of communist tendency, a geographical base and geographical reach, ultimate outcomes. For instance, in terms of ultimate outcomes, you can see, and this is sorted in terms of the most popular to the least popular. You can see increased public well-being was the top one. Decolonization and indigenous peoples' well-being was the least popular among the members of this cohort. I should warn that this cohort may not be representative of course, the entire pluriverse. It's just a sample, and the results are more inductive rather than deductive. Okay. In terms of the primary functions, and as you can see, we classified them into this. The most popular is on the top, the community network solidarity builders, and the least popular one is a policy influencer. In terms of the groupings, as you can see, in terms of the primary significant output they pursue, in terms of the primary means they use, in terms of primary service areas, and here are the 16 statements, and as you can see, the most popular statements, the ones that are most endorsed, is, for instance, are at the bottom. So promoting fairer distribution of opportunities and social economic justice, which means equalizing the economy, is the most popular, followed by making the local or national economy greener, which is the ecologization of the economy, and the least popular one is, for instance, making the political system more nature-centered among the participants. Promoting moral relationships is also another least popular. And here is the commonist. Here is the profile of the cohort that tells you that not everyone is equally communist, and we have a kind of a sizable minority on the left-hand side that show lower levels of communist tendency, and the majority of almost on the center right of the spectrum, showing higher levels of communist tendency. So the question is that what makes people more or less communist? When we do this social network analysis and visualize it on interactive websites like Kumu, we can actually relate each one of these organizations that participated in the research to those 16 statements. The statements are the orange ones, the blue ones are the organizations, and you can see that which one has selected what or endorsed more. You can click on, for instance, the statement. If the statement, for instance, is about ecologizing the economy, you can discover the names of those organizations that have endorsed that statement more than others. And if you click on the, for instance, the name of the organizations, you can see that each one of them, what statements are endorsed by each one of them. But as you can see, this social network analysis is called two-mode. We have two types of nodes, the organizations versus the statements. It doesn't tell us that about the interrelationships, but the potential interrelationships. The reason that we go for meta mapping, exploring the potentials, is that in reality, many organizations don't know about each other. They don't talk to each other. So when we put them together, then we can see that we can rank them, and the ones on the top with a higher score are the ones that have chosen a greater number of statements in conjunction with the greater number of other cases. So that is called degree centrality. It's one of the measures in social network analysis. I skipped that. It shows actually that the pluriverse is partly compartmentalized, and at least in the case of this sample. So these guys are more active in the economy and community, less active in ecology and politics, more involved in socialization and and ecologization, and less involved in equalization and democratization. And as you can see, those who have received higher scores in terms of making the economy to be owned or controlled or influenced by the community have, if you look at the left side, they have received the least, the lowest score in terms of promoting a stronger ecological value. So you can see the ecology versus society compartmentalization showing up here, and the same the other way around as well. And in terms of their ultimate purposes, ultimate outcomes being pursued by them, you can see they're more interested in ecological sustainability, in this case, increased public well-being, social justice, and much less in democratizing the economy, and much less in decolonization and the well-being of the indigenous, to the extent that it doesn't appear here. But interestingly, so the decolonization is endorsed, but only a small, as their own ultimate outcome. But This is the very interesting part of this discovery that shows that actually that little minority of the groups that are involved in the decolonization as their ultimate purpose or outcome, and indigenous peoples' well-being are showing the highest amount of or level of communism. So if you want to promote communism, you want to run a conference, make connections, make sure that you invite these guys. Okay, and then this is as I'm running out of time, this is the list of all the variables, all the factors that positively contribute or are associated or correlated with communism. It would be very interesting if you find time later to have a look, because there are very interesting stories there, and the ideologies as well. You may say, what ideology will make people more communist? Actually, it's the other way around. Those who are more communist endorse a greater number of ideologies. But it would be interesting to see what ideologies they endorse, actually, and what ideologies they don't. As the very last part, because this project was originally about the perceptions of these people about a good life or quality of life, I did a bit of a factor analysis. I found five categories, 5 approaches, 5 ways of conceptualizing good life. Unfortunately, one of them disappeared. I don't know why. So the post-humanistic one, economistic one, communalistic one, autonomistic one, and the other one was utilitarian, hedonistic approach to perception of good life. Now, guess which one shows higher level of communism? Can anyone do that? Which type of perception of life, good life, is more positively associated with communism? Okay, the next graph would tell you definitely the economistic ones are negatively associated. The highest is the communalist, those who value conviviality and solidarity as part of the definition of good life, followed by the autonomists, the ones who value autonomy, followed by the post-humanists who include non-humans, and then the last one is the utilitarian, of course, hedonistic. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much for being patient.